There is no migration crisis in Hungary. Today, at the early June in 2017, Hungary is hosting about 500 asylum seekers. Most of these people are, in fact, detained in the transit zones at the border, which provide inhuman conditions and basically unlawful and indefinite detention for anybody who's over the age of 14. As a human rights organization, we have an attorney who visits and provides free legal representation to asylum seekers who are detained in the transit zone. And we see the harsh conditions, the inhuman conditions in which families with small children must wait for their asylum application. This is actually nothing that is necessary. It's completely unnecessary to treat people this way in Europe, particularly in a country that faces no migration pressure or challenge. Why this is the case is the reason for this is the harsh policy of the Hungarian government that basically denies protection to refugees. It denies the fact that refugees are still arriving to Europe, and Europe has a responsibility to protect these refugees. Instead, the Hungarian government has chosen to focus exclusively on border protection, on keeping people out and denying them basic human rights. Also, at the same time, the Hungarian government's measures have led to Hungary being basically an outcast in Europe's asylum system. We see how the Hungarian government's harsh migration policy, its lack of willingness to provide protection, has meant that there are no more Dublin returns happening. There are many EU member states have decided not to return asylum seekers to Hungary because of the bad conditions which await them here. And therefore Hungary is now a place to which refugees cannot come because of the very strict border regime and the fence, and also to which refugees and asylum seekers cannot be returned to from other European member states. And this means that Hungary plays no part in European solidarity, it plays no part in offering protection, and it plays no part in sharing the responsibility for refugees and asylum seekers in Europe. What this effectively, I guess, means is that Hungary is presenting an example that is intolerable, that is completely not in line with our European standards, nor is it adhering to our European values. And so what this calls for is extra strong reactions from European Union member state capitals and also from the European institutions, the Commission. I think today, when we see how grave how grave a challenge migration is posing to the European Union, there must be an emphasis on certain basic standards and also solidarity among member states. If these basic standards of human rights and basically humanity are not met, then there must come clear signals. And also signals not only in terms of legal reactions, but also in terms of other reactions that might make Hungary, the Hungarian government, rethink its policy and rethink the way it acts in a European setting. Certainly doing a Hungarian-only solution is not an option. Migration is certainly something that is going to be around. I think it's better to manage it in a smart and humane and an effective way than to deny people human rights. But also, Hungary must be a full partner in European debates. It must be a fully active player in the EU. It can't go on its own in a completely different direction. And so I think efforts must be made to make sure that Hungary is willing to be engaged in solidarity mechanisms. It's clear that in case of grave human rights abuses and complete disrespect for European norms, the European institutions must take some action. If the EU institutions tolerate this with one member state, why should other member states comply with the rules? Why should they decide to take part in solidarity and responsibility sharing mechanisms if one member state can get away with it? There are various tools and options for European Union institutions to address this very strong challenge. to respond to this dilemma. One is to take legal action, such as the infringement measures, which are ongoing with Hungary and its asylum policy, but that seems to be ineffective on its own. And while infringement procedures are very apt to respond to individual violations of EU law, they won't remedy a much graver situation. And so I think there are political and financial tools that also must be used. The political tools are those that are at the disposal of the European Parliament and the European Council, such as the rule of law framework, a dialogue on respect for human rights, and the financial instruments are also there. Once a member state has basically declared that it wants no part in protecting refugees, why should the EU fund a member state's migration agenda? A member state's migration agenda that is completely contrary to the European basic values that all member states have signed up to.